Alrighty, so welcome once again to Movies Galore. I am your host, David Streggy. I'm from Milwaukee, and I welcome you to our podcast episode of George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead from 1968. How is everybody doing?
Great. How are you?
So, start by
Still missing some guests.
out with Celeste. What was your when was the first time you actually saw Night of the Living Dead? To be honest,
I'm trying to remember. It's been a long time. It's one of those movies I've seen over and over through the years. So I can't actually pinpoint the first time. It's one of those classic movies I feel like everybody or almost everyone has seen.
okay. And what about you, Katie?
I actually don't even know if I could pinpoint the first time I saw it either, but I have a more poignant story about actually showing it to my daughter for the first time. So that was kind of interesting, and that was more recent. So that was actually an interesting experience for her, but I can get into that later. But it's one of those movies that, like she said, I don't even know how many times I've seen it.
Okay. Dane, why don't you tell us a little bit about when you first saw film?
Well, first of all, I should make it very clear that this is a very personal film for me because having been dead all of last week, I am now a living corpse myself. And so this film, in many ways, is my life story. So I would appreciate a lot more sensitivity from everyone because this is a very indicative film of my people's struggle. And so any off-color remarks will be met with great offense from me. But let's see. I saw the film, I want to say around 5 to 6 years ago. And I don't know if there was any particular reason, just one of those essential horror films that you had to check off the list. And it's obviously a classic, and James Rolfe, the angry video game nerd, who said that he kind of saw it as like the in-between film between the classic era and the more modern era because it was in black and white and it was in '68, but it was so shocking and bloody for its time, and it was. It's also one of the great independent film successes because George Romero, the late great father of the modern horror film, it made it independently and was trying to sell it to a studio, but they wanted him to tone down the violence, reshoot the ending to make it a happy ending, and guess what? He said no. And so he stuck true to his vision. At the same time, he or the original distributor, whoever it was who was responsible, didn't put the copyright notice on the title card, which is what you used to have to do in the old days. And so that made it public. It made it public domain, but we are all the better for it because without it, we wouldn't have the word zombie being used to refer to what they in the movie called ghouls, meaning the reanimated dead. So because of that, and because it was public domain, we now have this plethora of zombie-related media.
Okay. What about you, KJ? Was this your first time seeing it, or do you remember seeing it before?
I saw it as a child. I think it came on AMC one day when I was a kid. I don't know if it was during like October or when, but I do remember seeing it because I remember it reminded me of another film that I think John Carpenter actually cited it towards, and that was Assault on Precinct 13. I remember it's like, this movie seems kind of familiar, like at least the setup of the movie with them being in that house or being in one location. But it's a very good movie. I think it's probably, in my opinion, I think it's one of the greatest B movies in that genre ever. I mean, I really do. It's interesting also, another thing was that, the guy, Dwayne Jones, he was a black lead. You never saw that before. And that was another thing I kind of liked about the movie, because, I mean, we all know a black guy in a movie, he's going to die at least in the first couple of minutes. Let's just be real. I mean, he's going to die. So it was good to see him be the star of that movie. But I like the movie, and look forward to what we talk about.
Well, that was revolutionary for that time period, because up to that point, black people, we got the Hattie McDaniels roles. We didn't get the hero. We didn't see a black guy calling the shots, standing up to the white guy saying, look, we're doing this whether you like it or not.
Yeah. And that ending is even more, I think, kind of controversial in its own self, because he does get killed by whites in the end, which is kind of interesting, because he was not an alien, or not alien, but a ghoul. That's the word. But he wasn't, but he was mistaken for one. So, that's kind of interesting too.
Yeah.
Especially because of the time period. That's right after the civil rights movement.
And it's not right after.
Does anybody know? Does anybody know the tie-in with that? When they went to take that film for distribution, about the same time that happened, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, and here they are bringing this film, that basically was going on in the civil rights movement, and it's happening right there. So I think that was kind of an interesting story that goes along with the kind of the black lead as well.
Okay.
I remembered hearing something about that. I should have done more research on this one, because there's such a rich history to it that I only kind of half remember. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. But I don't know. I'm kind of looking forward to hearing what you guys know about the social aspects of the time period and what the movie.
I was wondering why it became such a cult classic, why it has the lasting popularity that it has, apart from all the other movies of its time.
Well, it almost seems to me and I was thinking to myself that it seems to be almost like a found footage film, almost. Not that it was, but it feels like it just a little bit. But there was something that I was reading about Living Dead that I had not known, that is that most of the scenes that had words and whatnot were mostly ad-libbed.
Okay.
Which means that the film they really didn't have much of a script. In fact, Judith O'Dea had actually in an interview said that they pretty much did everything on the spry, and
especially
it didn't really have a script to work with.
Well, sometimes that's the best movies to do, because the original Blair Witch Project, they worked off of an outline. A lot of their dialogue was improvised.
Right. And it worked.
Yeah. I mean, you can you can get some very natural performances off of ad-libbing and improv. The main lead, the guy, he was a theatrical actor. He wasn't a film actor. So he was very, theatrical in his performances, classically trained. So, of anyone, he was very good at probably delivering those, improvisational performances than, other people. So.
By the way, we have a new guest here on board. Welcome, Texas Dead Man. Can you hear us?
I can.
Awesome.
Last.
Cool. Dane was helped put together by this guy from last week's episode, so that he could actually come into this discussion.
All hail, my lord and master.
Okay.
I wish I'd been more prepared, but I wanted to play a clip of Living Dead Girl there.
Texas, why don't you tell us whether this was your first time seeing the film, or did you see it before, or did you see it in the theaters? How did you see this film first? Did you hear me?
Who did you direct that one towards?
That was towards you, Texas.
Hey, I didn't hear the first direction of that. I think I first saw it probably in about 1974, 75-ish area. I was probably 9 or 10 years old. I remember catching it on a late night show.
Okay. And what were your thoughts about it at the time? What was your reaction to it?
I thought, actually, with a lot of people that I've talked with on this, I also agree with a lot of things that have said. People refer to The Night of the Dead as the start of it all, a true classic, brilliant, the best black and white horror story ever told.
I tend to agree there too, but I mean, the thing about Night of the Living Dead that people have to remember is that like Dane had said, the copyright at the time had actually been and not put in the company's in the company that was distributing them at the time, and at the time it was called Night of the Flesh Eaters. So when the Image 10, which is the company that Romero and the writer of the film Rousseau and some of the others that were backing some of the film, they had actually created a production company called Image 10, and they had actually had some kind of a copyright actually on the title at the time, which was called Night of the Flesh Eaters, but then the distribution company actually went and changed the title and took that copyright. That's how it went into public domain. So
yeah, we've actually showed it on Deadger's Dark Coffin Classics.
Hooray! I should probably go track that down.
By the way, Texas, this is Celeste, who is Deadgar's main girl on Deadgar's Coffin Classics.
Hello, Celeste.
Hello.
He actually knows of you guys because he used to live in Kenosha. So.
Oh, you do. All good
Yep,
things.
actually, I was born and raised in Chicago, and after I got married, me and my spouse were in Kenosha.
That's awesome. So, did you hear good things?
I have.
Oh, good.
It's Kenosha.
I have.
Awesome. So, the thing about Night of the Living Dead is that I've always felt that it was very raw. Especially for the black and white of its time, and even though it came out in color, I still think that the black and white quality of the film still holds up to this day. What about you guys?
There's one out in color?
Yeah, it is, but I like the black and white better.
Actually, I think that the lack of copyright is one of the biggest things to think about, because anytime anybody in any movie is watching a horror film, it is Night of the Living Dead. And it's that lack of copyright that led to that being able to happen. I mean, that's impressive. But we can't ignore the remake that Romero did of that movie, because that was his attempt to actually make any money off of the film. which was copyrighted.
Yeah, believe it or not, Night of the Living Dead was originally supposed to, the first script of it was supposed to actually be a horror comedy called Monster Flicks. and then eventually Rousseau actually had a couple of ideas to put with the script is that he wanted to make them flesh eaters, and he wanted something else to be in it, and it was because of these two ideas is why it isn't an exact ripoff of Matheson's I Am Legend.
I love that book.
So, I love it too. I mean, I think a lot of films have been partially inspired from the stories. So I think it would definitely be a favorite of mine too. But the theatrical distributor was actually the Walter Reed organization. So that was the theatrical distributor that had actually neglected to place a copyright indication on the original prints, and that is exactly why the copyright status changed. So, but in any case, did anyone else have any thoughts or experiences that they wanted to say while they were watching the film?
Well, oh, sorry. Well, I'm just gonna go. I'd seen it before, but it'd been a while, and so like watching it again and paying attention to it, the movie was much more engaging than I kind of realized. Because before it was like, oh, Night of the Living Dead, I'll just watch it because it's on. But I really like sat and paid attention to it, and I could see how it would have had such an impact on people like back in the 60s, because everybody was dying in the aisles from how like shocking Psycho was when it was just like the most benign thing I'd ever seen personally. But in this you have people like eating supposedly human flesh like on camera, and they were eating something, they had like animal parts or whatever, and so I could see how that would have really like nailed people back in the 60s.
Well, at the time, there wasn't that many films, and that was coming out of the
70s
black. The beginning to mid 60s to late to mid 60s, like 1965 to 1968, was the transition into the color period. Because I remember watching reruns of Dark Shadows and seeing like how one episode just changed sporadically from white to color, So it was an interesting age because a lot of people just liked the color experience. But I think when Night of the Living Dead actually went to the color stage, it took away some of the frightening aspects of the film and kind of takes the shadows and brightens to them and puts it more to a dumbing effect. So, but
let's not forget the fact that in addition to coming out at the same time as the civil rights movement, let's not forget that it came out right before the creation of the MPAA, and yeah, so you had this film. Yeah, well, you had this film that for its time was really violent and really bloody and disturbing and all that, and yet it's shot in black and white, and it has that same kind of tie to the classic era, so it sort of occupies this strange middle ground. But yeah, right, I think it was like 1 year before the MPAA came out, and that's of course when you had a lot of, well, you had G, PG, R, no PG-13 yet. And you had X-rated films, and then you had studios that were actually willing to put out X-rated films, and you had Midnight Cowboy, and you had Clockwork Orange, and things like that. But I don't know what that film would have received. Probably an X rating relative to its time. I don't know. But that's a very important thing to. There are certain films that come out and they're sort of the cultural, I guess, epochs, however you pronounce that, epochs. They help to define the next course of the industry in terms of content and that kind of stuff. Night of the Living Dead's one of them for the creation of the MPAA, and then something like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and Gremlins and stuff were partially responsible for the PG-13 rating. And, so there's just certain things that help kind of push the culture along.
Well, one of the things that's different between like now versus 50 years ago is that you have an almost desensitizing of society when it comes to horror films. I mean, what our grandparents found shocking back in the 60s, we're looking at it going, oh, that's kind of old hat. That doesn't scare me, But like you said, eating something that vaguely resembled human body parts back then, that was shocking. That probably had people passing out in the aisles.
Even in the 1950s, horror and comic books were starting to be banned, and there were politicians that were starting to go up against certain films, and were
Seduction of the Innocent by Frederick Wortham was the prompted the Comics Code Authority, and horror comics, which were very popular in the 50s, were very lurid and very graphic for their time, and even not all that off base for even today. So they were pretty out there, and superheroes got lumped into his crusade. But yeah, it's the same kind of thing. The authorities of whatever time attack whatever's perceived as denigrating the culture, but inevitably produce the opposite effects.
So Texas, do you remember any of the reactions at the time that you saw this in the theater?
I didn't see it at the theater, but boy, I tell you what, I remember that it did scare me. It was something totally different.
What were some of the reactions? What were some of the reactions of those?
I remember seeing stuff like about the same time era was The Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yeah.
Same way there.
Okay.
One of my all-time favorite movies.
Me too, buddy. Hey, can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Do it.
Hey, my question is to you guys, what was your favorite actor in the movie? And what was it that they did that made them your favorite?
I think it would be the lead for me. I can't remember. Was his character's name Ben?
Yeah.
Are you talking about Barbara?
No,
No.
Ben. Yes, I agree 100%.
No, he just showed up and he was like so strong and like sure of himself and was just like really he was just really impressive as a character. It's like, okay,
yeah,
I trust you. I can follow you.
I agree with you 100% on that. And my favorite part of that was the very beginning. That when Johnny and Barbara were in the cemetery to place a wreath on her father's grave, that's when Barbara escaped that first zombie, or what we call a zombie. Zombie was never really actually used in the movie at all.
Mm-hmm. But
then she escapes and gets to the house. And as in all the horror films I've seen where they find a phone, of course, the phone didn't work. Frantically, she runs upstairs to find a corpse laying in the floor, turns immediately back down and runs down to the front door, where that is where she met her would-be hero throughout the movie, which was Ben. Mm-hmm. And I mean, Ben continuously killed what they called zombies throughout that entire movie.
The only thing I don't understand is the type of hysteria that Judith O'Dea displays throughout the whole entire film. It was like kind of a heightened thing. The emotion that she was going through. I mean, I can understand some of it, but it didn't seem like her heightened emotions had actually calmed down any time throughout the film.
I liked Barbara's brother a lot. I always liked him.
I like to, and you know what?
Funny,
I didn't even know that they were brother and sister until focusing on this film this week. You know, I always thought they were a couple.
I love how he says, "They're coming to get you, Barbara."
Well, that's my favorite line in the
Coming to
movie.
get you,
Mine
Barbara.
too, and it's so fun and funny.
One of my older brothers, like that's what made the film very scary for me when I was a child, because my brothers are much older than I am, and when we first moved to Virginia from Louisiana, we had just buried my father in Quantico up here, the military cemetery up here. And so the first time we went to visit his grave, once we moved up here, one of my brothers, being the asshole he is, decided to like reenact that scene. They're coming to get you, Kimberly. Like, shut up. Like,
I will fuck you with this brick.
Yeah, exactly. So like now, every time I go to Quantico to visit my dad's grave, I always think about that fucking movie. Like I always do. Excuse my language.
KJ,
You can curse here.
what was your favorite actor throughout, and what made you like Texas had said? What made you like it the most, or him or her the most?
I can tell you who my favorite character is, but I can also tell you on the flip side of that who I paid attention to probably about the most. Ben was probably.
Okay, go ahead.
I said I could tell you who's my favorite character, but then I can also tell you when the person I paid attention to the most. And I'll say Ben was my favorite character, of course. But I paid attention to him more so in the second half of the film than I did then, because everything that he said basically did come to fruition in the end. I mean, if they stayed in the cellar, they probably would have been alive, all of them. But they didn't, so that's kind of the reason why all of them died in the end.
And what's interesting is that Ben's role was originally made for a Caucasian, male, originally, but he just kind of left.
I heard that that's not true. I heard that they didn't write the role for any particular race, but that he was the best of their actor friends, and that's why he got the role. That it didn't have anything to do with his race.
Well, no, it didn't have anything to do with his race, but it has been said that it was originally written for, that as kind of role. People expected that kind of a role, Yeah. It wasn't expected that an African American would be portrayed in that film.
David, can I say something?
I would say that was probably general attitude of that time period for sure. And that's what made it shocking that the lead was. But I think when they wrote it, they didn't actually write it with anyone particular in mind. But the thing that made it so shocking was that how it mirrored the civil rights movement at the same time too.
Well, not only did the civil rights movement happen at that point in time, but the assassination of Martin Luther King had actually happened earlier that same year. So,
I believe it was right around the time that they were taking the film to be distributed.
Correct.
Is when it happened.
Correct.
I do want to say something, though. I haven't heard anyone say it, but when you watch this movie, I mean, I'll say nothing that kind of reminded me of. Kind of almost felt like the Twilight Zone or something.
Like a what?
It kind of reminds me of the Twilight Zone when you watch this film to some degree.
It did kind of remind me of that.
It has that eerie kind of feeling to it.
It sounded. It felt like what?
Like an eerie kind of.
Okay.
Maybe was it like a dreamlike?
Yeah, it's kind of dreamlike, nightmarish kind of. It had that Twilight.
I think the black and white adds a lot to that too. Like it seems very lurid, kind of like a dream would be.
And I also kind of like the how the camera kind of just looks up at certain moments, so it's like at an angle, so that you see the characters like you're looking at them from like below instead of above.
They never really explained the zombies much. They were like, if they finally said, "Oh, there's some radiation or something," but they never really said.
That's the thing.
They didn't have to though.
That's the thing. George Romero had actually not mentioned nor clarified that he was making a zombie film or trying to have anything even remotely close to what he would consider the Haitian zombies. He actually had a totally different monster in mind and thought that they were monsters of their own.
I thought that was maybe kind of intentional without them having like a clear origin, because every time they turn on a radio or a TV, it was just like somebody speculating, like with nothing to back it up. Oh, radiation from space. And then like another time they cut in, oh, maybe aliens, and it's like, okay, these people have no idea what's going on. Like they can't even figure out that they're dead. Like,
And isn't the film really about how people handle the whole tragedy of it? Not so much about the monster itself, but the reactions of the people to what's going on.
Well,
I think that not having a lot of information about the monster tends to keep our focus on how the survivors are dealing with it.
Brandon, what was your favorite actor?
Oh, well, I mean, I can't remember the names of the actors off the top of my head. I always rooted for the guy who was basically scared witless, and of course caused everybody to die. I don't know what it is, but that type of character's in a lot of films. But I kind of felt like that particular thing, it spurs. He's an annoying character. He ended up, I think, in one point wrestling the gun out. It's been a while since I've seen the movie. I should have rewatched it recently. I instead rewatched Night of the Living Bread again, which different movie.
for shame.
Huh.
It was, but it spurs everybody into action, because otherwise they would have just stayed safe, and then nothing would happen. Yeah.
Every time I see a character like that in a movie, I just think, like, in that situation, I'd be tempted to kill them myself. Oh.
But that's the point, that's the idea, is that they elicit that reaction. I mean, I don't think he's the most important character by far. I consider the lead the most important for many reasons. But of course,
what was interesting about this film, while I was reading something about it before coming on, is that there were actually like 4 different colorized versions of the film.
Oh shit! Really?
Yeah. Hal Roach in 1986 did one that featured ghouls with pale green skin.
Woo!
And in 1997, Anchor Bay Entertainment released one with gray-skinned zombies. In 2004, Legend Films produced a new colorized version, and in 2009, Legend Films also co-produced and colorized a 3D version of the film.
Wow!
With Passmore Lab. So
don't forget the 30th anniversary edition, which had a bunch of.
True. It did have a different print, and there was also an animated project known as the Night of the Living Dead Reanimated. So they animated it too, and Wild Eye released that in 2010. So.
And just for anyone who doesn't know, any film that's in the public domain obviously is just that. It's in the public domain. It's free for anybody to use, watch, distribute, whatever you want to do with it. If you take that public domain work and do something to it, like or add scenes to it or whatever, you own the copyright to that version of it, but not the film itself, but you own the copyright of your particular version of it. So like Giorgio Moroder's Metropolis had a different set of copyright than the film Metropolis versus the complete Metropolis, which came out, which has all of the restored scenes, as many of them as can be found. So that's just a very important thing to understand, that do something like that that's unique and transformative to that work, even though that work is in the public domain, and that version of it that you do becomes yours.
I heard that the original cut of that was like 4 some hours long. Like, that's unreal.
Oh, no one knows exactly how long the original was supposed to be, especially since it was supposed to be a horror comedy. And it was actually done in 3 different parts. But that's what Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead ended up being, those other 2 parts. Not that I want to talk about those just yet.
I was referring to Metropolis because Dave mentioned that, but
Oh,
Gotcha.
it seems like a lot of movies had that problem. Because I saw Street Trash for the first time, and I was listening to the extras on
Love
that,
that
and they were
movie.
talking about how their first cut was something like 3 or 4 hours long, and it's like, how did you get that much content from this? Like, I was just in total disbelief.
Well,
And it's like cutting it down to 90
ultimately,
minutes.
No such thing as deleted scenes, so you just stuff everything in there.
There were only like 5 or 6 deleted scenes on
Like
there.
what they
And
did with
it was all kind of like,
I
okay, this
just
is
think
pointless.
if things were on reel-to-reel Ampex, I guarantee you it would be a long film to sit through.
That's like what they did with the extended editions of the Hobbit movies. If you look at the time difference between the extended edition Hobbit movies and the theatrical ones,
the only one
versus
I know. Sorry.
Well, but if you look at the time differences between those extended editions and their theatricals versus the Lord of the Rings extended editions and their theatricals, what was shot apparently is in the that was usable was in the theatrical cut, and so the extended editions weren't nearly as long as they were with Lord of the Rings. And also because of The Hobbit, they deliberately and artificially inflated those movies. But
it should have been.
That just tells you that
right.
a little bit, like, they in that case, it's like if you just shoot a lot of stuff, and this is again before the days of showing the deleted scenes and all that. It's like, well, if you shot a whole lot, then you just put it all in there if it's even usable.
I also think back in those days, you got to keep in mind they were making that in Metropolis's days, they were making a transition from stage plays to movie.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you had your intermissions, you had your musical intros, and it moved like that. You had your various parts and pieces.
In fact, an intermission is all that used to be in between, not commercials. So, I mean, at least from what I understand, because that's what would be considered the break, But now everything's made up of commercials, so which is what originally George Romero was originally doing. Original company, so but in any case, Texas, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, not really. There, other than some of the parts in the movie there, like where they were the radio, I thought was really well put together when they added the radio stuff, where they were talking about telling the people to remain in their homes or at work.
Mm-hmm.
And here was another thing where they never used the term zombie. They said that the humans were acting like normal people or looked like normal people that had appeared to be in a trance.
Okay.
That was kind of brought up too. Like they were trying to avoid like saying that they were dead for as long as possible.
And I actually don't think that George Romero ever intended them to be called zombies. I actually think that he just wanted them to be their own monster. It's just ultimately what they ended up being called in the end.
He basically got what he wanted, just the name was not what he was looking for. So yeah,
Well,
you're right.
and he also lost out on a lot of royalties because of the copyrights. So I think that's the biggest controversy that has to do with this film. Like Brandon had said earlier, I think that's one thing that definitely went wrong with the film, and that's unfortunately. And at the time, the critics really didn't like it for the gore, as we know. So.
Well, the critics back then were pretty fucked up. Like I remember something. There's in Ebert's review for Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There's something along the lines of, "It's a good movie, but I really didn't like it, so it gets 2.5 stars." Like there's stuff like that, like everywhere.
You disagree on that?
Yeah, well, Ebert had, God rest his soul, but
He
Ebert
had an attitude.
but he had a habit of taking stupid pills quite a number of times. I'm sorry to say. I know people love him. But
I love him too, but
I disagreed
sometimes
with
it's
him
just
quite
like,
a bit.
But yeah,
Did anyone else have anything else to add?
I did want to just share the little tidbit I was talking about earlier about showing my daughter this movie. I haven't shown her a ton of horror movies yet, but this is among the first group of movies that I showed her. And I think she probably saw it a year ago, which she was about 9 years old at that time. And the most notable thing for her about the movie, like the fact that it was in black and white, she said made it feel less scary for her. I think because, I mean, as a 9-year-old kid, how much black and white is she really seeing on TV? So I think that made it less realistic for her because it was in black and white. And then being so old, I think she was able to sort of really see it as a work of fiction and not something that she could relate to as much because it didn't look the same as what she's used to seeing. But what really got her was the ending. It was probably the first movie she had ever seen that had a really dire ending. There was no happy note to it at all. And I remember her just being like, oh, really? That's it? Like she couldn't believe it. Just like that first soul crushing ending to a movie for her. So that was kind of an interesting experience and kind of shied her away a little bit. She'll ask me now, does it end like Night of the Living Dead? And then, if it is a unhappy ending, I'll tell her, yeah, kind of it does. And she's like, all right. She has to think twice now about what kind of movie she wants to see because that really had an impact on her.
Oh, that's
Did she not see? Had she seen a lot of black and white movies before that?
No. This is probably her first black and white movie, I would say.
And when was that?
About a year ago.
Show her M.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's pretty tame, but really good. It'll make her
One of my
smarter.
favorite movies ever.
I
It's
actually
just
haven't
hard to
seen it.
read sometimes, and I don't think it does have a dubbed version out there.
I don't think it exists in dubbed, but it was. I had no trouble following it whatsoever, which I can't say about every dubbed movie. Well, subtitled movie.
See, when I was a kid, I watched black and white movies all the time, so that was sort of the. I didn't have like that big disconnect that a lot of people do. It was like, oh, it's in black and white, I don't like it. That was not me at all. I watched black and white movies from day one.
To be honest,
When I was a kid, I did that too.
It was TV series for me, like mostly because I had no choice. It was like, my dad was very old, like relative to other people's dads. And so there was like a black and white Western on TV most of the time. And if I wanted to watch TV at all, I had to watch that. And so I have kind of a disdain for black and white. But if something is really good, like it doesn't matter.
See, I watched black and white all the time as a kid, but we had a black and white TV, so
I remember having a black and white TV. I remember when all TVs were black and white somewhat because you couldn't afford a color TV sometimes.
Actually, I remember the first time I had a color TV in the house. It was just a weird experience for us, which is weird because I'm not that old, but 4 when I was younger, and the Color TVs were expensive in there.
Hand-me-down TVs, man. Hand-me-down TVs.
It's like. Did you guys see that King of the Hill episode where they get like the brand new like flat screen TV
Yes.
and they're like trying to figure out the features? Like the picture is so clear. This must be what madness is like.
Alrighty. If no one else has anything else to add, I think we've definitely talked about a few things that we're definitely able to talk about, and I think that everyone has a different point of view, so each of us saw it a little bit differently. And I think that when Katie brought up her daughter's experience, that was a very good thing to talk about, because you never know what our young folks nowadays actually thinks of some of the films that we grew up with, as that horrified us, and I think that the film means something different to each person, but that ending definitely does get everyone.
I was just this too. I mean, a lot of kids now, the stuff that they're exposed to, as far as violence and cinema, this movie is so tame.
Yeah.
It's the same class as Psycho, Experiment, Terror, all those movies from the 50s, 60s. It's so tame to me. It's just like, it's almost a comedy. Like certain elements actually of this movie I found funny watching it again older than it did when I was a little kid. The only thing that really got me is probably the part when the little girl kills her mother. It's probably the only scene in the whole entire movie that really got me. As far as intense.
Well, a lot of us kind of saw that coming, but again, that's sort of, jaded horror fan kind of. What you said about things not having so much of an impact anymore. It took me 4 full tries to get through Psycho without falling asleep, and I have yet to watch The Exorcist without falling asleep at least once.
Oh, I love both of those.
Me too.
There are so many good horror films out there.
I'm aggressively non-religious, so it's just kind of hard for me to buy into the premise of Exorcist in general.
Oh, that movie's great.
But at the same time, it's kind of like, people were like needing.
David, can we make him watch it?
Make him watch what?
The Exorcist.
I tried to watch it 3 times.
Ha.
We can make him watch. If you want to, I can make it next week's episode.
Yes.
Yeah.
Disgust me.
Let's do that. Let's make it next week's episode.
I am.
We sickened Dane with Salo. It's just Dustin's turn.
The things you people subject me to.
Alright, this is one of my all-time favorites. So
you say that about every movie.
Like I said last week. Tomorrow night, we are having another interview that I've set up. This time, it's only 3 films, so bear with me. It's with Darren Wood, and he has agreed to come on tomorrow night to discuss them and talk about John Carpenter's The Thing. So if any of you want to join in on that, and I know Brandon, you can't make it, but if anyone else is going to show up for that tomorrow, same time, same place. Celeste, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from?
All right, I'm Celeste. I'm from the horror host show Deadger's Dark Coffin Classics, based out of Wisconsin. I am also the host for the Glamour Junkies burlesque troupe out of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So I do a lot of events with them. So look up Glamour Junkies on Facebook and like their page if you would like. And if you want to see Deadger's Dark Coffin Classics, you can find most of our stuff on vimeo.com/ddcc, or look us up on Facebook.
Katie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Hi, I'm Katie Cadaver. I am a body positive horror artist, makeup artist, alternative model, burlesque performer, out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I do makeup for the horror punk band Rat Bat Spider. They actually have a show coming up this Saturday at Frank's Power Plant in the Bayview neighborhood of Milwaukee, 9 p.m., so check them out. And you can check them out on Facebook as well. I'm all over Facebook too, and I'm also affiliated as a Dead Girl with Dead Girls Dark Coffin Classics. So obviously look up Dead Girls Dark Coffin Classics on Facebook, look up Katie Cadaver on Facebook, and my artist page, which is Third Eye Open. Also, find me on Facebook and I'll get you hooked up.
Awesome.
Katie,
Texas.
Katie, I've never. Oh, sorry, Katie. I've never asked you this, but if you're body positive, then if you were to come into the vicinity of someone who is body negative, would you guys neutralize?
Probably not. I think I'd probably just overtake them with my awesomeness.
Oh,
I was gonna
okay.
say with punches, but I guess that works too.
So you defy that your awesomeness defies the laws of physics. Then I see.
Yeah.
All right.
I'd agree with
why
that.
not?
Yeah, I agree with that too.
Thanks.
Texas, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know that you're new to the podcast. Welcome again.
Well, thank you very much. Like I said earlier, my name is John Stone, by the way, and I can be found on Facebook by looking up Texas Dead Man's Halloween House of Horror.
Elaborate.
Like I said before earlier, I was born and raised in Chicago, lived in Kenosha for quite a few years, Pleasant Prairie area, now residing in Texas, and we've been down here off and on since '96. Me and my family.
Okay. KJ, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do?
I'm KJ. I have my group Timeless Classic Movies on Facebook. We have about 2,000 members. I started when I was 18. Currently, right now, just in school, trying to write a few things on the side as well, like small little screenplays and stuff like that. But besides that, just always looking for a good movie to watch. So hope everyone has a good night.
Awesome. Brandon, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do?
My name is Brandon. I work on a YouTube channel called Septum Sen versus the World. Our team is dedicated to trying to celebrate physical media, especially the DVD and Blu-ray. And we do various things, including movie reviews, pickup videos, and one of the things like what was released today, which is just in general what's coming out and what's going to be available in the coming weeks.
Cool. Alrighty. Dane, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
All right, I am Dane Kyle, a independent filmmaker for the moment based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. You can find my work on YouTube at the channel is the Dane Kyle, Keil, and you can find my work there, including my black and white German expressionist silent film Eternus, which I think that the members of Dead Gar's Dark Coffin Classics know a little something about. And you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and just stay tuned for the latest updates. I've got several projects in the works.
Awesome. And Dustin, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm a moderately recent time film fan, and I live in Milwaukee, and I go to UWM. And currently, I am failing miserably to understand how to do programming in Python, so I've been drowning my sorrows in Dead by Daylight.
Okay. And my name is David Streggy. I run a film group called Movies Galore of Milwaukee. I also write in a blog, the same name, which I am also a small-time producer. One of the films that I'll have been one of the executive producers of is coming out in 2018. It's Brad Twigg's Wrestle Massacre. and among others. So definitely stay tuned for more that I'll probably be part of. And next week, be prepared for Dustin's reaction to The Exorcist. I'm also going to give a plug to a book here tonight that I found when I was at the Women's Film Festival. There was a young poet that does. He's African American, and he does poetry and songwriting while he's biking in the parks that he goes. And he's got a book that's out. It's called Club Noir, and his name is Kayvon Cortez Jones. You can find his book at relevantmilwaukee.com/Kayvon. So definitely check it out if you can. It's got some cool, unique, darker poetry or whatnot. So check it out. In any case, hopefully you guys enjoyed this discussion. I'm hoping to have many more with you guys. So stay tuned till tomorrow night. Same time, same place. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Thank you.
All right.